In this video, I'm going to show you how to place the valve cover and gasket on this Honda Civic. This valve cover is right on top of your engine, so let's get started. With the help of a flathead screwdriver, turn these knobs 90 degrees, and that will allow you to remove this cover. Make sure these don't go flying as you remove this. Set this aside. This harness is held on with a couple 10mm headed bolts, one right here, and one on the other end right on the corner. You should be able to lift this up, push it towards the driver's side. That'll unhook it from there. Now you can fold it over, and to get some extra slack, you can unplug all of the ignition coils. There we go. To get even more slack, there's a tab right here on this blue retainer that you can pry on. When you pry that, you can lift the harness right up and off. Flip it over, remove the clamp from this hose, and we're going to have to pull the hose off of the valve cover. Give it a couple gentle twists. Try not to break the hose, of course, but you're trying to break it free. A lot of times it gets stuck on the valve cover. There we go. Now if you wanted to completely remove the hose, you can. Just take this hose clamp and push it the other way and take the hose off of this line. There are two 10mm bolts holding a harness on the back side of the valve cover. One is right here. Take this off. And one on the other side. Lift this harness up, push it back. You're not going to be able to go very far with it, but just enough to clear the valve cover. The dipstick goes through the valve cover, so we're going to remove it. Be careful because it is plastic. The valve cover is held on with 8 bolts in total. They're all 10mm in size. There are 4 in the front and 4 in the back. I'm going to remove them all, starting from the outer ones, working my way in a cross pattern to the center ones. All right, they're all broken free, so I'm just going to remove them one at a time now. Now you should be able to grab the valve cover, rock it back and forth, break it free, and remove it. There it is. The gasket may or may not come with it. There's your valve cover and the gasket. We want to clean up around where the gasket seals, and that is this whole surface, basically, around the surface of the head. This right here is the timing cover, and you'll notice there's old RTV in the 2 corners. That's where the cover meets the head. We have to remove this RTV, and of course we have to reapply new RTV. Be careful. Looks like this is quite a bit of RTV here. I'm going to take a razor blade and scrape it so I can pull it off. Now you don't want it to fall inside the engine, of course, as well as any debris that you scrape. So when you scrape to clean away, or scrape away from the engine, not towards the engine. The reason you need RTV right here is because there's a split, there's a seam, and the gasket won't be able to seal it up 100%. You'll have an oil leak if you don't put RTV on. I recommend using a razor blade on the entire surface of the head, not only because it's soft and is less likely to gouge the aluminum, but it's easier to get into the tight places here, especially on the back side of the engine. If you have a gasket scraper that fits, go ahead, just avoid sandpaper or anything that's going to damage the aluminum surface. Once you've cleaned everything up, take a rag and wipe off the surface. In the 2 corners here, we're going to have to use some brake parts cleaner on that rags to degrease the surface, because you don't want any oils interfering with the new RTV that we're going to put down. I have some brake parts cleaner on this rag. I'm just going to clean all this off, get the oils off. And just go around the whole surface and do the same thing. I have some oil-resistant RTV here that I'm going to apply to this seam. You don't need much at all. You just need a tiny bit. If you put too much, it'll actually go into the engine on the timing chain area, and that's obviously not good. You just want to cover that seam. Do the same on the back side. Take the new valve cover, slide it on, and make sure that it lines up before you drop it down in position, especially right here on the front where the RTV is. And that is perfect right there. The gasket, I double checked it, it's still set into the valve cover. Now let's start putting all of the bolts in. On the first few, you might have to move the valve cover around a little bit to get the bolts to line up with the threads, but the more you put in, the more lined up it'll be. Okay, they're all in. I'm going to start tightening them, working my way from the center ones out. It doesn't matter which one particularly you start on, as long as you go in a cross pattern. And you want to do this in several passes. So first bottom them out, then snug them. The last pass will be the torque sequence, which is 7.4 foot-pounds. Everything's bottomed out. I'm going to go around and snug everything up by hand, and then we'll grab the torque wrench. All right, let's torque everything down. 7.4 foot-pounds is the torque, and if your torque wrench reads inch-pounds, 89 inch-pounds is what it converts to. I'm just going to go around one more time to make sure they're all tight at this point. It doesn't have to be in the same sequence, just in a circle is good. That's all tight. Reinstall the dipstick. Transfer the filler cap from the old valve cover to the new one. On the back of the engine, make sure everything is back into position here. All the wires are good and all the harnesses are laid back where they're supposed to be. This retainer for this main harness gets bolted on with the two 10mm headed bolts. So start those back in. Tighten these up. About 1/8 of a turn at most after they bottom out is plenty. They're very small and you don't want to break them. Let's put this hose back on. Slide it onto the pipe first, and then on the valve cover, just like that. Get the clamps resituated. If they feel very weak, like they can't hold tension anymore, replace them. Even though these aren't supposed to hold a lot of pressure, they are supposed to hold. So get this harness laid back over the valve cover, and remember that it has this tab that it has to slide into. There you go. And put back the two 10mm headed bolts. Snug them up. Plug all the ignition coils back in. Make sure all the connectors click. And lastly, the cover that goes over this wiring harness. It has to slide into the front, and once you feel it lock into place like that, you can press these down and turn them 90 degrees clockwise to lock them in. At this point, the job is done, so turn the engine on, make sure there are no leaks and that it runs properly. There you have it.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.